Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Noring. I work for Microsoft as a senior cloud developer advocate. This talk is called Infrastructure as Code with ARM templates. You can find me on Twitter at Chris_Noring should you have any questions during or after this presentation. Now, this is a one-on-one session on infrastructure as code and ARM templates. So if you have no clue what this concept means, or maybe you know, this is a good starter. This will also be a starter with ARM templates. I will not be covering Terraform so much, but I will mention the fact that on Azure, you can definitely be using ARM templates as well as Terraform. Let's talk about the whys and what. Why are we here? Why are we talking about infrastructure as code? Well, we used to have development teams and we used to have ops team, and in some companies that is still true, but for most of us, we have kind of merged. We have the development team and the ops team now are on the same page. They're on the same team, they're working together, and they also therefore use the same processes. Now, another point to make is that how we iterate has changed. And an iteration today not only means the change of application code, but also deployment. So when we build an application, we might actually need to deploy a few services such as Azure Functions, web apps, maybe some database, maybe a virtual machine. Thinking of an iteration is about thinking about application code nowadays, plus whatever resources that we need in the cloud. Because of this, when we iterate, we need to do so often, and we need to make sure it's accurate. And the way for us to know that it's accurate is by ensuring that the infrastructure can be expressed as something that we can look at. And that something is code. So if the infrastructure is code, we will know exactly what is being deployed.
Chris, sorry to interrupt your session. Just to let you know, there's a blank screen. I'm not sure if it's meant to be showing something.
Right, let's start from the beginning. How about if I do current slide? How about now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, presentation mode is not working, but that's fine.
Okay, great.
Right, sorry about that, everyone who joined this stream. Let's quickly start from the beginning so you're able to see what I'm talking about. This is a session about infrastructure as code. That means we will talk about infrastructure and turning that into code and talking about how we can be organizing and building that code. This session will cover ARM templates, which is the primary way that you can express your infrastructure on Azure. That doesn't mean that we doesn't support other versions as well. We do support Terraform, but this session will focus primarily on ARM templates. My name is Chris Noring. I work for Microsoft. Let's go through this slide again, and hopefully you see this time. So let's talk about the motivation around this, the whys and the whats. Today we have two different teams. We have development teams and ops teams, and well, to be fair, those teams used to exist historically, but what we have today is a merge. We call that the DevOps movement, if you will. A lot of us will still be working in separate teams as developers and a separate team as an ops team, but the point is we need to see ourselves as being on one team, and that means we need to be on the same page. We need to use the same process. And this also means that we need to think about how we iterate, because we are no longer, as developers, just changing application code to add a new feature or maybe fix a bug or whatever it is. We need to consider the other parts, and the other parts is the infrastructure. And that means that an iteration is really application code and whatever changes we need to the infra. For that reason, we need to be able to express everything as code. So infrastructure needs to be code, application code is already code, but now they're on the same page and they can actually live in the same repositories and be versioned. As part of this, we need our deployment to be frequent and we need them to be accurate now that we are inside of the cloud. And this also means that anyone on your team, whether they are an ops person as their specialty, as their T-shape, or if they are a developer, both of them have the ability to now deploy everything, and everything being app code and infrastructure. So this is really a new way of thinking about things, and this is why infrastructure as code is such an important concept. So on Azure, we have these two versions of doing things. The ARM templates, if you read it out, it's called Azure Resource Manager, and it's a first-class citizen, which means that there's a lot of tooling that exists. We will also ensure that it also works really, really well. Now, with that said, Microsoft is very aware that Terraform is used cross-cloud for regardless of whether that is AWS or GCP or some other cloud provider. And we do understand a lot of you will actually work with a lot of different clouds. For that reason, we also support Terraform to a certain degree, and we are continuously adding different features. So those two options definitely exist, and it shouldn't be a blocker for why you go with one over the other. But know that Terraform is probably a better match if you are on several different clouds. With that said, I have actually seen people who are only on Azure use Terraform because we support it so well, and maybe sometimes you just want the different paradigms. The choice is yours. There are a lot of reasons why you should be using infrastructure as code. So a lot of these reasons on this slide is really, not only why ARM, but also why infrastructure as code in general. We talked about some of these things, but the fact is, if you have a declarative syntax, that means that you're able to express to Azure and say, hey, this is what I want. I want a virtual machine and I want Azure functions. But I also want a repeatable result, which means when I have a template that I'm about to deploy to Azure, I want to make sure that this template is doing the same thing all over. Every time I deploy it, I want the same results, and that's what you get. Module files is another interesting topic here, because you don't want probably one gigantic ARM template. What you want is probably focused modules that only do one thing. Maybe they only deploy a certain web application with a database, and maybe you want some other module file that expresses something else. The point is, it should be easy for you to divide up the templates in a way that makes sense for your business, whether that is per feature or per life cycle or whatever reason it is. Anything on Azure is something that you can actually get an ARM template from. So yeah, I should mention that an ARM template is really just JSON. It's just JavaScript object notation. You have every ability to also extend these templates with the shell scripts. So we also have that. And it's also possible to test your templates to make sure that they actually do what you think they do. I have a link at the end of the presentation for a script that you can run. I believe it's a PowerShell script. I should mention generally that there are tons of different resource links at the end of this presentation if you want to learn more about ARM templates and infrastructure as code. We also have the ability to preview changes. And this simply means that there is a application out there that can actually say, if you were to run this script, what would happen? So the end of running this, or the end result of running this script would be to say, well, you're about to create an Azure function and maybe some other cloud resource like a cognitive service and so on. So you would always know beforehand. There is also built-in validation. You will see this when you work in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. You see that there's a validation in place that says, hey, you're doing this wrong. You're misspelling this parameter, or you can't combine X with Y. We also have the concept of track deployments. This is as simple as saying you're able to go into the portal and say, hey, this resource group have all these deployments that you've done historically. So you can go and see, oh, okay, on the 11th of June, I did this deployment. On the 2nd of August, I did that, and so on. So you have all that traceability. We also have something called policy as a code. And this is an important topic. And regretfully, I don't have the time to cover this so much, but I've definitely left you a link at the end of the presentation. We also have deployment blueprints, and of course, this works really, really well with CI/CD and Azure DevOps. Your code is exportable, and we also have different authoring tools, which I'm about to spend most of this presentation focusing on. So you're about to see that up next. So lots and lots of different pros for why you should be using ARM. This is what you might be looking at the first time you see an ARM template, and I can just see how you're going cross-eyed just looking at this big blob of JSON. What is this? I can't even see the what's going on. I mean, if you've been working with Azure, you might see some familiar names here, like storage account. This is probably a storage account if you look at the right side of this presentation, and you kind of might recognize different SKU versions and so on. So if you've been working with Azure, you have a good sense, even though this is not color highlighted the way that I presented it, but still, it's not readable like this. And this is the main reason why we need some kind of tooling support to make it easy for us. We need a way to visualize what this looks like for real. We don't want to have to remember all this JSON. JSON isn't really for people. Send help, am I right? Let's talk about authoring tools, because we have two very excellent authoring tools within VS Code. One of them is the Azure CLI Tools extension. This one will help you immensely when it comes to doing any kind of Azure CLI interaction. It supports code completion, documentation, syntax highlighting, and much more, snippets. Then we also have the second one called Azure Resource Manager, and or the ARM tools extension. I'm about to showcase this one as well. This will definitely help you to author the template, but also tell you when you're doing things wrong, which is really, really valuable. So an ARM template, it has an anatomy, and having an anatomy simply means it has some major parts that it consists of. And those parts are parameters, variables, something called user-defined function, resources, and outputs. Now, parameters is really input parameters, if you will. Like if you consider it to be a function, you would have X number of input parameters that you can use and send into that function. It's the same principle here with ARM templates. We also have the concept of variables, which, at least in my head, I kind of think of those as like private variables within the ARM template that can help me do things. And then you have the user-defined functions. These are functions that you write. So you can take the help of all the existing functionality and libraries that exist within ARM template already, call those functions, and add your own little factor X into that. So you can definitely write your own functions and use those throughout the template. Now, resources as a concept means that these are the resources that you're about to deploy. These are virtual machines, Azure functions, web apps, and all the different things that you can code for in Azure. Now, outputs is what you actually return back. So this is like a return value, if you will. This is a section of your ARM template in which you say, hey, I actually want to return something useful from this ARM template. And what is that useful thing? Well, that useful thing is usually maybe some password or maybe some URL towards an endpoint that it would make sense to serve as inputs for another template. Or let's say that you create a resource, but you want a piece of information right now. You don't want to have to run another Azure CLI command, or you don't want to have to go to the portal to find this information out. It could definitely make that part of the output. So what about deployment? Well, I think if a lot of you are probably on Team Windows, you're sitting on Windows machines, you are maybe used to using PowerShell. We have two different ways of deploying your ARM templates, with one of them being PowerShell that you, as I mentioned, might be used to, and the other one is the Azure CLI. I will be using Azure CLI exclusively throughout this presentation, but I will link you to a tutorial at the end, which will show how to do this in PowerShell as well, so don't worry. Hopefully what I'm talking about today is not dependent on it being shown in PowerShell, but rather we're going to talk about ARM templates and how those look rather. So this is it, right? This is the simplest hello world version of an ARM template there could possibly be. This is just JSON. And it has three elements: the schema elements, the content version, and the resources array. And what I'm showing you is just something that doesn't actually deploy anything. And I can just imagine that you're all thinking right now, Chris here is crazy, right? I'm showing you an ARM template that does nothing. But the fact is, I just wanted you to focus on some basic elements here. of the smallest possible thing that I can deploy, because you can actually deploy this. Believe it or not, Azure will actually take this as an input and say, fine, I'm going to treat this as a deployment, even though I'm not deploying anything, it's fine. And yeah, so we have the schema. It's worth mentioning about the schema that this is a schema that you need to point to. There have been different schemas historically. As you can see from the schema here, it has this notion of a date. We also have a content version, so we can actually have these schemas in different versions. Make sure you pick the correct one. And lastly, we have the resources array, and this is where the resources that you want to deploy exist. So now you hopefully know what a very bare-boned ARM template looks like. Now, this is me using Azure CLI. I wanted to explain what I'm up to here. The first thing I'm doing is to declare this variable called template file, and this is me pointing towards a JSON file. I'm actually giving it the full path. In this case, the Azure deploy file is at the same directory in which I'm running the command. So I'm declaring this template file variable. Next thing I'm doing is actually to say name blank template. This is just a friendly name. This is for you. So if you go into the portal and say, what did I actually deploy? I mean, blank template is obviously not a good name, right? Maybe here you would say something like trying to deploy my web app that handles products, or some other good friendly name. And then we have a resource group. And here I'm about to tell you a story about ARM templates historically, because when you have deployed them historically, it was possible for you to deploy them right to the subscription. Nowadays, we want you to deploy into the resource group. And this is why we give it a resource group here as an argument, because everything you deploy should be on that logical bucket, on that resource group. And lastly, we give it the template file variable that we declared here on top. So now we have done all the important bits. So this is actually a deployable command. What we should realize is what happens underneath, because it's kind of good to understand what goes on here, right? So the thing that happens is that depending on what you're trying to do, it's trying to do a post request towards a certain URL. And as you can see here, it will just fill in the blanks that make sense for your subscription, right? So here you can see how subscription ID, resource group name, and a lot of other variables are going to be replaced. And lastly, we see that it has a request body in which it sends through all the different resources. And yes, this translation is not a one-to-one between the command and what the end result here is, but this is rather to say that this is what normally happens. Because you're sending off the blank template with no resources, your request body would be quite empty. But imagine that the JSON file that you are deploying actually contains resources, then the request body would be populated. So now you know. Now you know that anything you try to do into Azure CLI or PowerShell is going to be replaced into something that looks like this. So what happens on the portal side? We have gone to portal.azure.com and we have looked up a resource group, and now what? Well, we're clicking this overview left menu option, right? And here on the right, we can see how deployments 5 succeeded is a link that we can click. Well, first time we deployed this would obviously be saying deployments 1 succeeded, but because this is a screen, a print screen from when I've been deploying 5 times, it would say a 5 instead. So for every time you deploy, this would increment the number, right? But still, as I said, click this link, and if you click this link, you're going to end up in a view that looks something like this. So here is what you actually deployed inside of your deployment. So the first thing you see here on your top left is blank template. And on the left side, you can also see inputs, outputs, and templates. Now we don't have any inputs. We didn't send any parameters through. We also don't have any outputs in this very simple ARM template, but we do have the template itself. So if we click that, we will here on the right, we will see our full JSON template. Now it's not much to look at, but in a more advanced deployment, this would obviously be filled with a lot of different things. So now you know, whatever you do on the terminal, whether that is PowerShell or Azure CLI, you can always go to the portal and inspect and see what actually happened throughout this deployment. What did you send in? what did you get out, and maybe most important, exactly what ARM template did you send across. So input, output, template. Now we're looking at something that actually contains a bit more. So this more is actually a storage account. We had used an extension inside of VS Code to accomplish this one in the first place, but this is what a deployment that actually deploys something would look like. So here we have an entry in the resources array, and we can see that it's of type storage account. We also see that we have a location, and that's kind of important to realize as well. And lastly, we have some kind of SKU. Now, so why am I mentioning those? Well, you might actually want to change the name. You might want to change the SKU to, I mean, when it comes to the name, you might want to change it to make it more unique. Storage account 1 is not a good name. When it comes to the location, you might want to deploy it, where it makes sense for you, because you might not be located in East US, but rather somewhere in Europe or maybe somewhere in Asia. And as for the SKU, you might not want to go with the most costly option here, so you might want to go with some other value. Now, let's do some fun stuff. Let's actually go into VS Code and have a look at this. So now I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. Hopefully that doesn't take all night. Oh, and I'm gonna show you a bit more of the window, because right now you can't see anything of anything. Right. Oop, I'm gonna close you as well. There, now I have a bit more space. So what are we saying? When it comes to adding a resource, the first thing we want to do is open up our ARM template, and we want to check out our resources. So I'm about to demo the whole ARM template extension that you can install inside of VS Code. What we will do is to go here, and we will actually clear this one out. So imagine that I have started with this blank template thing, right? I have nothing to deploy at this point. So what I can easily do here is to say, right click, insert item. And this is really powerful here, because now we see parameter, I see function, I see output, resource, and variables. I see all these different artifacts that I could be creating. And what I want to be creating is a resource. So we're going to go to resource, and we're going to say storage account, because that's what we want to create. I mean, if you want to be creating something else, that's fine. But you have quite a lot of different snippets here that will help you out. Let's go back to our storage account, and you simply just type for it. There. And now it just gave me a snippet, and let's clean this up a little bit.
And his stats are still very similar to Tom's.
Right, so now we see how we have added this storage account snippet here, and we can also see that we have a location here and a
Chris,
function.
Sorry to interrupt again. We're not seeing this demo. We're not able to see it. I think you might need to exit the PowerPoint.
Right. Sorry about that, everyone. Just learn that you don't see anything, and that's unfortunate.
Thanks.
Let's see. There. Now we have exited, and not that one. We're able to see now.
I'm still seeing the demo add resource slide.
Right. Okay, 1 second. We will get this working, I promise you all.
Because it looks bad on me.
How about now?
No, still seeing the same thing.
Interesting. I'm seeing this.
And they told me they were on course for doing it.
Let's see.
Every time I asked, yeah, we'll get it done, should get it done. Tom's excuse was that there's 10 modules with 10 videos and didn't have time to watch more. If he had a couple more weeks, he'd get it done. That was what he said. Kath just said, no.
Bear with me, everyone.
That's all I got for him.
Let's see.
She's good as shitty. Anyway.
How about now? Do you still see PowerPoint?
Yeah, I'm still seeing PowerPoint.
Okay, we have to solve this after the presentation, and we have to continue. I think need to work this out.
Okay.
Let's go back to presentation mode. That's a bit unfortunate, but luckily I have print screens on most things. You will still get the whole gist of this. I'll also make sure that I have recorded some videos for all of you. Hopefully now you see the PowerPoint. Right, so if we pause this step, unfortunately we didn't see the demo inside of VS Code. That would have been really helpful. But to deploy this template, it's quite easy. All we need to do is to have this script. I'm gonna see here. Sorry, I'm gonna go from here. I remember the presentation mode didn't work so well. So now you should be able to see the PowerPoint. This is a deployment script, right? We have the Azure CLI. We're able to set the name, the resource group, and the template file. Now, let's talk about input parameters, because these are a very important topic. Now, input parameters enables you to be very flexible when it comes to ARM templates. Instead of just saying, I always want to have this set name or always want this set location, you can actually have them be very flexible thanks to the fact that you got input parameters. So what you have inside of your ARM template is a parameters section. And from what you can see here, the parameter is called storage name. And it also has a default value. And this is good to know, because if you set the default value and you don't specify the input parameter as part of your Azure CLI or a PowerShell script, it will assume this value instead. But you can definitely help yourself and whoever else looks at this template by providing this metadata description and tell people, you know, what should this thing be doing.
Chris, sorry, we're just still seeing the demo add resource slide. Hasn't moved on from that.
Really strange. It
seems to be a bit stuck.
Right. Okay, I did do a stop presenting. How about now?
So now we've got just your camera on, no slides.
Right. And if we go here, what about now?
Yeah, can see the PowerPoint now.
Perfect, perfect. And I'm doing current slide. Really apologize for this, everyone. And I just have to repeat things. Right, so input parameters. Those are a very important part of the ARM template. It enables you to be very, very flexible when it comes to templates. And yeah, all you need is a parameter section as part of your ARM template. And here you can see how I've given it the name storage name. I'm going to use this as a storage name inside of the template. By giving it a default value, this means I don't have to specify this parameter as part of my Azure CLI or PowerShell script when I run this. But it will assume this value instead. But as you can see here, my explanation is to say change me, so I should probably in this case give it a good value. The metadata and description section is for when you actually want to describe what is this used for. I urge you to fill this in for you and for your colleague and definitely your future self. We could also be adding different validation rules here, like min and max. Let's see here. And yeah, let's move on and let's actually show how this is used in the template itself. So here we got parameters and we're saying parameters storage name. And this is me really going towards the parameter section, digging out the storage name. And as you can see in the storage account here, I assign you to the name property. And it's the same thing here. When I create this tags display name, I again assign this. So this is what you need to remember. If you need to have a parameter section and you need to have this parameters part. I'm going to do a new attempt and see if we can actually share VS Code this time. And if it doesn't work, my controller here will just tell you. So hopefully we don't waste too much time. But there is a lot of value in seeing how VS Code does things. I think the last time we were able to do this because I unshared. So we're going to do that. If I stop sharing and hopefully bring up VS Code and the let's see here, there. Let's see if my controller tells me in a sec as soon as I shared my screen that this is okay. And if we now share our screen, and that is, let's see here. So what do you see at this point, dear controller?
So I'm just seeing your camera on, and there's no slides being shared right now.
Right. Oh, well, as I said, we just have to be sharing videos of these demos after the fact, but hopefully this presentation is valuable enough for all of you.
So they can be taken into task.
Let's see. Okay, now in a few seconds you should be seeing the PowerPoints again.
Yeah, so that's showing now, Chris.
Perfect. Right. You've already seen how you could be adding a parameter, so we don't actually need a demo of this. We have a parameter section. I can just quickly repeat that. You need a parameter section, and all the parameters here goes as keys inside of this parameter section, and you need to refer to it like this. So that's really all you need to know. And we can easily be deploying this, and I just want to highlight the fact that you would need to set this -- parameters, and you would just set it as a key value. So storage name equals some kind of unique name. And yeah, you could actually be improving your parameters, because in the case of, for example, adding a SKU, there are just a few values that are actually allowed. So what you would do here is to specify an allowed values array, and we would have different versions that are allowed values. So if you, as a user here, would type anything that's not in this list, you would actually get a validation error. So this is really good thing to do. So whether that is maybe just 2 different SKUs that you allow because of your company, or if in this case I'm listing all the SKUs that exist on Azure, that's really up to you. And to use this, new topic. We're going to talk about template functions, which are built-in functions for ARM templates. You might see this early on when you try to use this VS Code extension tool to actually, for example, create a storage account. What we're looking at here is something called resource group. If you see this at the default value, you see that the resource group is called like a method. So the resource group parentheses means that we are actually calling the existing resource group we are deploying towards, and which gives us an object back, and then we do .location. So this is an excellent way of setting a default value on the location value here. So that's perfect. This means that whatever resource we're trying to deploy will actually end up on the same resource group location as the resource group that we pointed out. And there are tons of different template functions besides the resource group one. Now, let's talk about variables. Variables are a different topic. They are more like private variables within your ARM template, and they can be really useful for you to express things such as a unique storage name. I mean, so far we have been creating names that weren't really good, right? I mean, Azure account 1 to 99. That's not really what you want. You most likely want some kind of prefix in combination with some kind of randomized value, because you don't want to have to write that. And to do that, we actually have different functions with us. So we start off by this built-in function called concat. It does what it says it does, which is to concatenate 2 different strings. And then we are actually calling this unique string on the second argument here. And what that one does is to take your resource group ID in as an input parameter, and it creates a unique hash. And your storage prefix that you also see here is something that you could be adding as a prefix as part of your script. So that could be your company, for example. So let's say that you work for company A. So this would be, for example, A-, and then you would get a unique string. So that's perfect, right? You would know that all of your resources comply towards a certain name standard. Looking here at the bottom, we see how we would actually talk to this inside of the ARM template. So here we can see that we're doing variables, unique storage name, and we're assigning that as the name of a specific resource. So this is really a valuable thing, and yeah, as I said, there are a lot of built-in things such as concat, such as unique string, and so on. And yeah, moving on, when we deploy this, the only thing we need to do is to set the storage prefix. In this case, we set it to store, but as I said, use this to set your company prefix or whatever unique identifier that would say, yeah, whoever deployed this template, they know about our company standards. And outputs. Output is an interesting topic because you're able to return something back. So you run this template inside of your terminal, you're using PowerShell or you're using Azure CLI, and the output is really return variables. And that return variable could be a primitive like a string or an integer, but it could also be a complex object. In this case, I'm pointing out storage endpoint as a variable that I get back. And it's of type object, so it's a bit more of a complex, so it contains different variables on it. And the value here is pointing out a specific thing. So I'm going to take you through what's going on here. First off, we got reference, and reference has the ability that using some kind of key, it's able to look up a resource. So reference in combination with unique storage name actually looks up the entire resource. We get an object back and we're able to say, hey, I want primary endpoints from this object. And primary endpoints in itself is a complex object because it, I believe it contains 2 different URLs. So this is perfect if you want to return back and you just created a storage account and you want to know what public URL that you need to refer to. And yeah, let's talk about user-defined functions. These are functions that you completely write yourself. So what you're doing here is to, first off, you define some kind of namespace. And if you're a .NET developer, a namespace is not a new thing for you. It's a thing that you would use to scope things. And this is so you don't get name collision. In this case, we're calling this namespace utils. And then we have company, which is your function name. And once you have a function name, you want some kind of input parameter, which is what you have here. And we say that the input parameter is called in, and it's subtype string. In the output section, the interesting bits are happening. In fact, in the output value section, this is the function body, if you will. So this is where you do all the transformation necessary and you spit a value out. So what you're doing is to concatenate my company dash with whatever that input parameter is, and you return that out. But you can be doing way more complex things. I'm just, showing you something very simple so you understand what goes on. And yeah, to call this, you would simply just say utils.company and then provide an input parameter inside of this. Working with ARM templates, you kind of need some visual support at some point, and this is what I recommend. I do believe this is not by Microsoft officially, but I strongly, as a Microsofter, recommend that you download this extension because it will give you a visual overview of what ARM templates is and how they work. So it's able to take your JSON and it's able to show you something visual that you can reason about. And it looks something like this. So you have your JSON on the left side, and once you show some kind of ARM viewer here, so if you click the eye here, if you click the eye, and on the right here, you will get all the different resources that you're about to deploy. So here you can see a website, a function app, a database, a storage account, and even a logic app. So as you can see, this resource template does a lot. But your visual overview here from this extension is wonderful, and it's able to show you all the different things that you're about to deploy. Now, if you don't have VS Code, don't worry. We have another thing for you. We have this. We have armvis.io. This is not an official Microsoft thing, but some good soul out there created this, and all you need to do is go to this website, dump in your JSON, and you will see something that looks like this. So here you see a virtual machine, you see different parameters, network interfaces, and so on. So all these wonderful visual tools exist for you and to make it easy for you to actually develop and author your templates. And again, all you need to do is press the I and you will see the visual part, or you will press this one to edit your JSON. Right, there's been a lot of things I've been showing you. I've been showing you template functions, I've been showing you variables, I've been showing you outputs, all these things. So where do I start? I mean, I work at a company, right? Let's assume I don't work for Microsoft, but I'm all in. I heard all these great things about infrastructure as code. So where do I start? Well, start by, if you have VS Code, start by downloading your templates. And the way I understand it, in Visual Studio itself, we have a visual overview, and some of you will probably prefer to stay inside a Visual Studio, and that's fine. Right now we have a survey out. One of my colleagues is trying to understand all of you who work with Visual Studio, what kind of extensions, what kind of support do you need. But for VS Code, we have these extensions that they are awesome. They not only validate your ARM template, but they give you different snippets to make it super easy for you to work. But if you have an existing infrastructure, if you are there and all of your infrastructure is something that you created through PowerShell or Azure CLI, but you don't have it as a JSON and you're not versioning it on GitHub, you can actually export out those templates and you can have a look and see, oh, this is all the things I've deployed, and you can actually start working with your templates from there. I also wanted to mention strategy, because I can imagine some of you have a question right now that says, Microsoft, do you have a good recommendation for how should I be organizing my template, or how should I be deploying things? Well, we are a bit boring in that aspect. We just say that this is up to you, but here are some suggestions. You could, for example, have a master template and a lot of linked templates to it. So those linked templates would be separate files, or there could also be templates that are in line within the master templates as well. As for deploying, you could be deploying by product. So everything that has to do with the order application, for example, the order website, the order database, the order Azure functions, all of those are in the same life cycle. So it makes sense to deploy all of those at once. But we don't want to have a too strong an opinion here as Microsoft, but we rather want to say whatever strategy suits you and your company, use that. Here are some suggestions. Here are some features like linking that you could be using to support whatever decision that you have. Exporting a template is quite easy. You just go to the resource itself. So here we have gone to the portal. We have looked up a storage account, and we have here on the bottom left, we have pressed the menu option that says export template, and it actually showcases the exact template for that deployed resource. So here you can see what parameters it have, what variables, what resources, and on the right here I've blanked out the JSON template itself, but this is where you would be seeing all that JSON that you could copy paste into a JSON file, and you can keep on working that way, and then you can take that JSON file, start pushing that into Git and start versioning it, and you are actually doing infrastructure as code. There are so many more things to learn about this. I just showed you a few odd functions here and there, but hopefully I showed you all the important bits and you understand the difference between a variable and a parameter. You understand what a template function is and what an output area is. So go here to the introduction, have a look at the tutorial, definitely if you're a PowerShell person, because that tutorial supports both Azure CLI and PowerShell. Have a look at the template functions. There are many of it. There's almost no reason to write your own user functions, or if you do, those are most likely just calling different template functions. Here, if you want to adopt some kind of strategy on linked templates and how you would actually do the linking, this is where you should be reading. I mentioned, I think in the first slide, how you could be testing your template. Here is a GitHub link for you. It's called ARM-TTK. It's a PowerShell, I believe, PowerShell script that will enable you to test your ARM template. And I also mentioned on the first slide that sometimes you want to do a dry run without actually doing the deployment. And this is where you use this what if function. I realize that this one is not showing you the full URL, but I believe we will be sharing this PowerPoint deck to all of you, so you'll be able to see exactly what I linked to. And I will also make sure, of course, to update it with different video sequences of, demoing different parts that unfortunately you didn't get to see now. I also mentioned this topic of policy as a code, because policies are important. Those are an important part of your ARM template, definitely if you're a big company. And we have a whole section written on policy as code, because you can definitely start using that as well. So in summary, we need to deploy infrastructure with application code. It's not one or the other nowadays, it's both. Infrastructure, or IS, stands for infrastructure as code. ARM and Terraform are supported on Azure. You don't have to pick one over the other, don't worry. You can deploy ARM templates using either PowerShell or Azure CLI, and you could be authoring ARM templates with VS Code or Visual Studio. And please use the extension, it will make your life so much easier. We want to hear from you. So here's a survey link, and here's also an event code, so you know where to feedback. Now I will actually stop sharing my screen and see if we have any questions at this point. Probably, how do I do this in VS Code, am I right? Let's have a look here. Let's see, you still hear me, I hope. And are there any recommended strategies to grouping ARM templates? For instance, what would be the best way to group traffic manager and traffic apps? This is an excellent question. As I said, when it comes to grouping, we try to think of it as different topics and really what makes sense for you. If this traffic manager is only used for this certain web app, it makes a good case to kind of bundle them together. I would also reach out to Neil Patterson. I believe he's on Twitter. He is our foremost expert actually on ARM templates and how you would group things, but also for different extensions. I will make sure to feedback that name somehow to all of you who have listened today. The session is being recorded, and I believe it's going to be shared as well. And I also believe we will be sharing the slides. Let's see here. We have a question that says, if you can deploy to resource groups, is it a common approach to spin up a new resource group per development branch? I would say this, we try to make sure that you don't have to allocate too many resources out there on Azure, being full aware that you actually pay for it at the end of the day. So I would actually say this, it's a good question because we're talking about branches, right? We're talking about development, staging, and production. If you actually clean up after yourselves, I see no reason why not, why you would have a specific resource group for development. So I would actually say a thumbs up to that one, to have different resource groups for different branches. When deploying, what mode would you recommend, incremental or complete? And when would you use complete deployment mode? I have to owe you the answer on that one. I don't know from the top of my head, but it's an excellent question. Maybe there's a way we can copy these questions and I can make sure to answer them at the end of the slide here. So I'm going to have a talk with my controller afterwards. I saw someone talking about using complete mode when you want to delete resources as increment. Okay, this is the same kind of question. I will make sure to answer this one too. And yeah, thank you all today for listening. Super happy that so many of you were actually able to come here this morning and